things.
In the meantime, we've been seeing this U.S. proposal emerging for the Vice President, Omar Suleiman, to take temporary power. Why is the U.S. focusing on Suleiman as its point man?
Well, it has become clear, and the answer to that is we don't really know. But what is clear right now is that President Obama is saying that the person who should head the transition process that they're calling is Vice President Omar Suleiman, and he said this to other world leaders who he spoke to on the phone today. He said this process has to start now, and it should include members of the opposition. What is not clear, and I think it's because it's a more delicate matter, is exactly what role should Mubarak play in this transition process. That is to say, from today until September, when supposedly there will be elections, what is Mubarak supposed to do? Now, obviously, the protesters have demanded from Obama and have asked him to tell him to step down immediately, but the White House has refused to say that directly in an official or public manner in any case.
Indeed, that's been very clear. Now, also, we've been hearing from U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. She's been saying she's warning of a perfect storm in the Middle East. So it seems to suggest that the U.S. is trying to prepare itself for the wider implications of this Egypt turmoil.
Absolutely. But Clinton's speech today is not essentially very different from what she said in Doha earlier this year, warning, if you will, the regimes or leaders that there should be economic and political reforms in the area. However, now she has been emphasizing a lot more that this is somehow inevitable, that change is going to come, that it is a tidal wave, and that it really can't be stopped. It's a perfect storm. As you said, that those were the words that she used. It's not really a very different stance on behalf of the State Department, and it does have the undertone of somehow a warning to leaders in the region that they should not go against this current or this movement.
Monica Veer-Mizar in Washington, thanks very much for bringing us that update from the US. Well, joining us now from Chicago is Sharif Bassiouni, who's president of the Egyptian American Society, plus a former UN human rights expert. Thanks very much for being with us on Al Jazeera. First of all, let's look at this rather significant development of the Muslim Brotherhood holding dialogue with the government on Sunday. This is a banned group that's suddenly being given a voice.
Not really. The Muslim Brotherhood participated in the 2005 legislative elections. They elected 88 members to the parliament during the 4 years in which they were active in parliament. They proved to be very responsible participants in the legislative process, and so they've had a role in a secular parliament. You remember 2 years ago there was an amendment to the Constitution, and one of the principal changes was to include a statement that the notion of citizenship was going to be based on Egyptianhood. In Arabic it's called muwatana. And that was a very, very important word. It was a key word. It was a symbol that the Muslim Brotherhood was willing to accept a secularist system in Egypt. Now, that represented a younger generation of the Muslim Brotherhood leadership. The older generation would rather not be involved in the political process because they don't want to be secularized.
So do you see that there's a new role emerging for the Muslim Brotherhood and that it's only being galvanized by these protests and by...
I don't think so. They've always had a role, at least they've had a role in the last 5 years. I think the leadership has taken the position that it will not participate in an interim government of a secular nature in order not to attract any negative attention to it. I think what they want is assurances that in the amendments to the Constitution and to the election laws, sometime at the end of this year or next year when legislative elections are called, they would be able to field their candidates as they did in 2005 and gain their place in the legislative process.
Well, what do you think the protesters,
so I think it's
how are the protesters going to react
position.
to this?
You know, the world's media is focused on Tahrir Square. There's a lot going on in different cities: Alexandria, Suez, Port Said, Beni Suef. The rural areas are very placid, they're not moving. But there are also things going on outside the Tahrir Square throughout Cairo. I think right now what we have is a situation in which the government and the people at El Tahrir and others are sizing each other up to see who will sort of blink first. The government is banking on the fact that people are going to be tired after 2 weeks. They're going to want to go home. Most people are going to be tired of everything being closed and blocked. The economy is in a bad situation, mostly, and that's something nobody speaks of, mostly because the oligarchs of the Mubarak regime have taken all their money out, and most of them have left the country. So this is the big perfect storm. It's not what Hillary Clinton speaks in political terms. The big storm is going to be when the damage to the economy is going to be found out about the Mubarak family and all of their cronies in the oligarchies who have taken billions out of Egypt's economy and put it abroad.
So it's just a matter of time. What do you think is the significance of the resignation of the leadership of the NDP on Saturday?
Well, the NDP was a sort of a visible symbol of corruption. First, because it stole the elections in a blatant way. It was literally in control of the police, which engaged in all sorts of abuses and mistreatments and arbitrary arrests and torture for years. And that the police was the private security of the oligarchy. And because they were a symbol of corruption, that leadership had to be changed. But what's very important to know is that people are talking about succession and interim governments without realizing that the Egyptian constitution provides that in the event that there is a vacancy in the presidency, then the vice president, if there is a vice president, becomes an acting president for 60 days. If there is no vice president, the Speaker of the House becomes acting president for 60 days. After 60 days, there has to be an election. Now, in order to have an election, according to the Constitution and the laws on election, which are very restrictive, the candidates have to be nominated by a party. So if Omar Suleiman is going to be the nominee, then it has to be the NDP who is going to nominate him. And he cannot be nominated by politically corrupt and tainted people. So he has to have, if you will, a clean house. That's why President Mubarak resigned as president, the Secretary General resigned, Gamal Mubarak resigned, and all of these visible symbols of abuse and corruption are out of the way. New figures will come in. They will be the leadership of the party. So when they nominate General Suleiman, there will be some credibility in that nomination.
Question is whether it will be credible enough for the protesters. Sharif Bassouni, thank you very much for joining us with your thoughts from Chicago. Well, meanwhile, a senior Hamas commander has returned to Gaza after escaping from prison in Egypt. Ayman Nofel was welcomed by supporters outside his family home in Nuseirat refugee camp. He was amongst thousands of prisoners who escaped as anti-government unrest gripped Egypt at the end of January. Nofel was a former chief of Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassam Brigades. He was arrested in Egypt in 2008, but denies plotting bomb attacks there. OK, well, let's catch up with some other news from around the world. We can join Kimberly Hulkett in our Washington Broadcast Center. Kimberly.
Laura, thank you. Well, Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to a ceasefire after renewed fighting in a disputed border region on Saturday, killing at least one soldier. Now, just a day earlier, 4 soldiers and a civilian died in violence near a contested 900-year-old temple. Andrew Potter reports.
Cambodian soldiers exchange fire with Thai forces on a section of border which has become a flashpoint between the countries. This battle coming minutes after both sides had agreed to a ceasefire following a clash on Friday which killed 3 Cambodian soldiers and a Thai villager. It's the latest flare-up in a long-running dispute over the area around a 900-year-old temple on Cambodian land. Thai nationalist groups are pressuring their government to take it back. This fighting lasted half an hour, and when the guns fell silent, at least one Thai soldier was dead and a dozen from both sides injured. The temple being fought over was damaged, along